But you have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen.
Off! Give me the meat, and give it to me raw.
I have seen my share.
You have not. You have not seen what I've seen.
As I prepare to dive into Season 2 of The Rings of Power, rest assured that my review will maintain a level of sarcasm that's as sharp as sting, and unlike the series itself, will be thoroughly lore accurate. A small but deadly elvish blade renowned for its sharpness and its ability to detect orcs. In the same spirit, I'll be slicing through the nonsense with precision, ensuring that no deviation from Tolkien's world goes unnoticed. And for those of you who like to play along at home, I'll be counting every Tolkien reference, both proper and improper, as we go. Stick around until the end of the video, where I'll reveal just how many accurate nods to Tolkien's work I've managed to script in. Because if the show can't stay faithful to the source material, at least my critique will. And it was quite fun doing it, so let's dive in. The Rings of Power, a production so lavishly funded, yet so egregiously flawed, that one wonders if the budget was sourced from Smaug's hoard, and the scriptwriters from the Saxville Bagginses household. If ever there was an argument against making a deal with the devil, or in this case Jeff Bezos, this series might just be it. In its attempts to bring Tolkien's grandiose legendarium to life, it instead manages to summon the literary equivalent of a Balrog at a children's birthday party, out of place, catastrophic and deeply unsettling for all involved. From the outset, it was clear that this series would not be the leisurely stroll through the Shire that the fans might have hoped for. Instead, it's more like a hurried sprint through the old forest without Tom Bombadil to save you from the encroaching nonsense. Galadriel, that paragirl of wisdom and ethereal serenity, has here been reimagined as a battle-hardened warrior princess, with more emotional baggage than Samwise Gamgee on his way to Mordor. Her transformation into Middle-earth's answer to Xena is so jarring one might suspect Saruman himself had a hand in it, twisting her character beyond recognition, as though she were just another pawn in his petty game of Middle-earth chess. And then there's poor Celeborn, Galadriel's steadfast partner and one of the most important elves of the Second Age, who has been unceremoniously written off as missing, presumed irrelevant. His absence is as baffling as Frodo tossing the One Ring into a Gondorian fountain for a bit of fun. One can only assume he's gone into hiding to avoid association with this narrative disaster. And really, who can blame him? It's as if the showrunners took the most iconic marriage in Middle-earth and decided it wasn't quite dramatic enough. So they're saving a tearful reunion for when they finally introduce Celeborn riding a dragon, because I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. But the crown jewel of absurdity might be the portrayal of Sauron. Not as the Dark Lord and malevolent force that Tolkien meticulously crafted, but rather as a misunderstood anti-hero with a sympathetic backstory? A redemption arc for Sauron? Really? It's as though Morgoth himself has taken over the writer's room, hell-bent on twisting Tolkien's lore into something unrecognisable. We're led to believe that the greatest deceiver in all of Middle-earth might just need a good therapist and a hug. At this rate, we should expect Gollum to open a rehabilitation centre for wayward orcs in Season 2, offering group therapy sessions and mindfulness workshops on how to deal with precious stress. The narrative structure of The Rings of Power is as disjointed as a Denethor's mental state after an extended stay with a Palantir. Episodes wander aimlessly like the Fellowship lost in the mines of Moria. Scenes drag on longer than the lifespan of an Ent, and any semblance of pacing is abandoned in favour of seemingly endless shots of characters brooding or staring meaningfully into the distance. It's like watching Ent's poetry, long, ponderous, and without the comforting certainty that someone will eventually destroy the One Ring and bring this misery to an end. Take the Harfoots, for example, those discount hobbits who seem to have misplaced their moral compass somewhere between the Shire and the Land of Nod. After crooning a saccharine tune about never leaving anyone behind, they promptly abandon their own at the first sign of danger. This kind of character inconsistency is so egregious one can almost hear Tolkien weeping from beyond the grave, or perhaps he's just muttering, "Not all those who wander are lost," but clearly these writers are. Meanwhile, Númenor, that grand and tragic island kingdom, is reduced to a mere shadow of its former self, more akin to a Renaissance fair than the towering pinnacle of human achievement in Tolkien's lore. The richness of Númenorian culture is discarded in favour of cheap drama and nonsensical plot twists. It's as if the producers heard Fall of Númenor and decided the best way to depict it was to ensure the quality of the show fell first. Perhaps they're saving the true grandeur for a later season, right after they reveal that the downfall was actually caused by a particularly nasty case of seasickness. And then there's the Forging of the Rings, an event of monumental importance in the grand tapestry of Middle-earth's history, treated here with all the gravitas of Bilbo misplacing his buttons, instead of a carefully plotted scheme by Sauron to ensnare the free peoples of Middle-earth. They are given a rushed and incoherent subplot, at least one yearning for the clarity and purpose of Tolkien's original narrative. It's a bit like receiving a Morgul blade instead of a Christmas cracker. Deeply disappointing and likely to cause long-term damage. One almost expects Sauron to start a motivational speaking tour, how to win friends and influence elves. The Rings of Power doesn't merely dabble in nostalgia, it brazenly mimics Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy, often to its own detriment. From the sweeping prologue narrated by Xena, the warrior princess, Galadriel, to the battle sequences clearly inspired by Jackson's cinematic style. The series seems more interested in recreating Jackson's visual aesthetics than in developing a unique identity of its own. The result is a show that feels like a hollow echo of its predecessors, rather than a fresh take on Tolkien's world. Even the music, composed by Bear McCreary, attempts to evoke the grandeur of Howard Shore's iconic score, but falls just short of forging its own path. The series' reliance on these familiar elements doesn't just feel derivative, it highlights a deeper issue, a lack of confidence in its storytelling. Instead of exploring new creative avenues within Tolkien's rich lore, the show clings to Jackson's shadow, ultimately diminishing its own potential. In conclusion, The Rings of Power Season 1 attempts to stand on the shoulders of Jackson's cinematic giants. In doing so, it reveals its own inability to capture the heart and soul of Tolkien's world. As we brace ourselves for Season 2, one can only hope that the series will find its own voice, rather than continue the mere echo of greater works. And now, dear viewer, let us cast our weary eyes upon the trailer for Season 2, which, despite being 10 times better than its predecessor, still manages to stumble over the same pitfalls that plagued the first season. The trailer teases us with what could have been a thrilling continuation, but instead delivers a slew of lore-breaking elements that will leave any true Tolkien fan clutching their Silmarillion in despair. For starters, we are treated to the sight of Tom Bombadil, an enigmatic character who, in Tolkien's works, never strays far from the old forest near the Shire. Yet here he is, inexplicably found in the distant lands of Rhûn, interacting with characters like the Stranger, who is likely one of the Ishtari. This geographical and narrative inconsistency feels like a desperate attempt to shoehorn fan-favourite elements into a plotline that simply doesn't support them. And there's the introduction of young Shelob and the army of Barrow-wights, creatures that have no place in the Second Age, yet are seemingly inserted to up the ante on the show's epic scale. The mystics, who should have perished in the previous season, also make an inexplicable return, casting spells that would make any self-respecting Tolkien scholar wince. One cannot overlook the Palantir seen in the hands of Ar-Pharazôn, who is clearly being set up for a power struggle in Númenor. While the use of these seeing stones is without precedent, the way they are being used to contrive conflict feels more like an episode of Game of Thrones than a thoughtful adaptation of Tolkien's world. As if that weren't enough, rumours swirling about Season 2 suggest the inclusion of LGBTQ+ characters, sparking yet another debate about the show's adherence to Tolkien. To understand why this is controversial, one must consider that Tolkien was a devout Catholic, whose works are imbued with his religious beliefs. Middle-earth is deeply rooted in themes of creation, fall and redemption, reflecting his faith. Injecting modern social issues such as representation into this context can be seen by some as a fundamental misunderstanding of the source material and an affront to the author's intentions. It's as though the showrunners are determined to graft 21st century social issues onto a narrative that was never designed to accommodate them, further alienating the core audience who cherishes the spiritual and moral framework Tolkien so carefully constructed. In conclusion, while the trailer for Season 2 may be more polished and promises greater spectacle, it does so at the cost of further distancing itself from the very lore it claims to adapt. The lore-breaking elements, from misplaced characters to anachronistic events, only serve to deepen the divide between the series and its source material. As the new season looms on the horizon, one can only hope that it will find a way to honour Tolkien's legacy, rather than continue to dismantle it. But if the first season is any indication, it seems The Rings of Power is more likely to wander further into the wilderness, lost in its own misguided ambition. As I bring this rather scathing critique of The Rings of Power to a close, let's address the elephant in the room. Middle-earth deserves far better than what's been served up so far. If, like me, you're tired of seeing Tolkien's work treated with all the reverence of a half-eaten crumpet, then it's time to take action. Subscribe to the channel, ring that bell, and prepare yourself for my reviews of Season 2. I'll be dissecting every episode with all the precision of a hobbit divvying up the second breakfast, and with sarcasm as sharp as Sting itself. And don't worry, I'll be watching so you don't have to. Oh, and in case you were actually keeping track, there were 30 Tolkien references tucked away in this little diatribe. If you caught them all, well done, you've got the keen eyes of an elf. If not, don't worry, there's plenty more where that came from. Stick around, because the journey through the Rings of Power is far from over, and I'll be here to guide you through the good, the bad, and the utterly baffling.